In addition to us slow drip discussing the problems of legacy media, we must put forth an important term called the Overton window, also known as the window of discourse. It's a heuristic device and important underlying concept in regards to the range of ideas and opinions that are considered acceptable or mainstream in public discourse at a given time. The wonderful psychedelic philosopher Terence McKenna used to say, "The world is made of language." As our also wonderful 7 liberal arts teach us through grammar, Aristotelian logic, and rhetoric, one being input from others, the next being thinking hopefully for ourselves, and the other being communicating to others, we come to be educated that what we hear or read determines what we think, which determines what we communicate about, which determines what happens. First on an individual level, then on a societal one. Hermeticism teaches us that the secret keys are through the mind. New Thought, which was an early precursor to modern-day self-help and a somewhat watered-down version of Hermetic philosophy, says that it must be conceived in the mind before it can be realized. This term is also known as the Overton window of political possibilities, as a teaching tool that gets people to understand the importance of putting ideas ahead of action. The core concept is that politicians are limited in what policy ideas they can support and generally only pursue policies that are not radical or absurd, but instead widely accepted throughout society as legitimate options. These policies lie inside the window. Other policy ideas exist, but politicians risk losing popular support if they campaign on these ideas, because those policies lie outside the window. Politicians will only espouse policies that they believe do not hurt their electoral chances, and the range of policy options available to a politician are shaped by ideas, societal movements, and shared norms and values within a society. All of this suggests that politicians are way more followers than they are leaders, and it's the rest of us who ultimately determine the types of policies they will get behind. In addition to these shorter on-camera insights, we've been doing a pro-democracy series of narrated essays to do our part to help fight back against this democratic-hating authoritarian cult which has taken over the United States Republican Party, the silver lining of which has more activated members of the pro-democracy movement with content like you are listening to now, so you're welcome. Typically going forward, we will continue to break down the separation of the superior pro-democracy majority, which stretches across a spectrum of progressivism, liberalism, and sometimes even slightly conservative, that versus the inferior pro-authoritarian minority, which is extreme right-wing fascism. But this time around, and from a historical standpoint, it's important to mention that Overton window has typically been framed more either in a left versus right dynamic, liberal versus conservative, blue versus red, or sometimes in the laughably misleading false binary of government control versus freedom. Framing things this way, the left-blue lib has for our whole lifetime been superior in quality, honesty, and governing effectively, which raw data certainly shows, cue regressive minds exploding, that the last blue American presidents, for example, have evolved policies and improved the economy, while the last numerous red presidents have de-evolved policies and hurt the economy. While the red right con is inferior in representing the American people and more allergic to honesty, it is important to realize that they have been superior in terms of communicating and messaging, usually done through anger and straight up stoking fear, pathos, which they do through their media machine that they built up over the decades, essentially playing the long game, because they have long known about this term. The name Overton window comes from the last name of Joe Overton, who has been primarily admired by conservative leaners, and most if not all sources we always find discussing this subject are quite libertarian. Rational, decent politics in a democracy should be about compromise. What Overton did was essentially repackage the basic negotiating principle that if you ask for a lot, you will likely get more than if you ask for a little. For example, if the dark imperial agents of the Christian wrong propose non-white babies be outlawed, Uzis for school kids, all abortion or any form of birth control be illegal under a hyper-patriarchal theocratic nightmare, every Palestinian child either be banished or eviscerated from Israel so their false messiah can supposedly return, and every American swear their allegiance to their con man Führer, and we propose 100% of all lands are given back to the descendants of Native Americans, the Supreme Court be only comprised of African American female civil rights lawyers whose grandparents were forced here as slaves, all gun shops be required to sell an equal amount of abortion pills and birth control pills as they do bullets, a dozen Green New Deals over the next 30 years with 100% carbon-free smart grid and electric maglev high-speed rail networks from coast to coast, 50 years of reparations from Israel for their decades of Palestinian genocide, and sheets of LSD freely available at every checkout aisle, all of those things are likely currently outside the electable window. But if repeated and entered into the zeitgeist over time, shift from fringe to compromise to normalization and then to actual policy. Because those in the know about this issue know that oftentimes years or more like decades of rhetorical output work need to be put into place before things shift. Due to extreme polarization, many politicians in a divided government spend years getting minuscule to minor things actually accomplished, instead spending large percentages of their time just trying to move the window with rhetoric by going on media networks. And from a legacy media standpoint have historically shared a limited view talking point at best. Noam Chomsky, in his book The Common Good, says, "The smart way to keep people passive and obedient is to strictly limit the spectrum of acceptable opinion, but allow very lively debate within that spectrum. That gives people the sense that there's free thinking going on, but all the time the presuppositions of the system are being reinforced by the limits put on the range of debate." That has historically been legacy media in a nutshell. But adjusting or moving a limited Overton window happens through the extremes. So not only have the proponents of Red America been good at limiting the window usually into historically very pro-corporate and oftentimes very pro-military industrial complex framing, which has de-evolved into fascistic and theocratic framing, they have also for years been using, which their criminal loyalists now amplify, members of their own party whose time in the spotlight have been mired in controversy while having accomplished nothing in terms of actual governing whatsoever, except for saying such horrendous, extreme, regressive things on propaganda media networks that those things are designed to simply move the Overton window in their party's favor. With a result that the conversation is not highest common denominator of very conscious philosophers and high-level thoughts, but instead down in the gutter with the sole attempt to move the window more in their direction. Because when the blog posts or sound bites or talking points are of lies, disinformation, and general lowest common denominator gutter slime spread by an often complicit legacy media, they have their intended effect to drag things down. So that over the years, things evolve less and sometimes move backwards. The main crucial thing to realize is, as a result of years and years of misinformation and disinformation trying to move the window, the logical critical thinker says, "I'm not surprised anymore," or "I've gotten used to this," or "I'm numb to it," or "I've never thought we'd be going down this road," which is by design.